and restart it and do that if you'd like. So I can just keep teaching. So that is really the only scriptural argument we can make. Okay, cool. Connecting with that is, as I already mentioned, all of those things from the Gospels where Jesus is quoted as saying, as Moses wrote, and he quotes something from Exodus or something from Numbers or something from Deuteronomy or one of the other books that are lumped in there with the books of Moses. So you take all these kind of things together, and there's certainly the implication of that. However, I do want you to understand, and that was generally held as common knowledge and belief until about the 19th century. And then there were some scholars that came along and said, no, we don't think Moses wrote this at all. But there were other reasons for their conclusions that are not worth talking about here. I think it's safe to assume that is a correct assessment. Now, chapter 1 deals, as we've talked about, with the creation of the material universe. It's broken down into what categories? How does it break it down? By day. And how many days? 7. There's 7 days of creation. The first day, God separates the light from the darkness. The second day, he separates the waters. That's verses 6 through 9. What does it mean that he separates the waters? Especially when you consider that the third day, he separates the seas, it says. So what does it mean by the waters on the second day? Okay, right. He created an atmosphere around the earth. He put some water outside the earth. I would also suggest that at least he laid the foundation, if he didn't make it happen already, for there to be waters under the earth. There are the fountains of the deep. There are the windows of the heavens that open up later on in the story of Genesis. Water comes from below and above to reflood the earth. At creation, what's the status of the earth? Well, the status of the earth is water is over the entire circumference of the earth. What he does on day 2 is create an atmosphere. He creates a canopy of water, if you will, and other things, but a canopy of water around the earth that gives us really something vital to sustaining life. Without our atmosphere, we would be a barren land. Third day, he separates the seas from the land, and he sprouts vegetation. The fourth day, which is verses 14 through 19, he creates the lights in the heavens. What's that talking about? I thought he made light on day 1.
It's the lights. So the stars, the celestial lights.
The celestial lights, the sun, the moon, and the stars. It's very important that we understand something. Light existed before those bodies existed. And so we need to understand that though the sun has been given dominion over the day and the moon has been given dominion over the night, doesn't mean that is the genesis of the light. Where's the genesis of the light? God. And there's a lot of people who have trouble with the fact that vegetation is made before the sun is made. Because how does photosynthesis take place with no sun? Well, to begin with, there's only a day. And you can go without sun. You can put a plant under a box for a day and it's not going to die. But more importantly, there was already through each one of these days the cycle of evening and morning the first day. There was already daylight and darkness even before he made those things, which is somewhat important because it talks about the power of God and the fact that those heavenly bodies are not what is in control and not the reason why there is light and there is heat and there is the ability of sustenance on this earth, but in fact that arises from the will of God. And they arise from the will of God. And so rather than worshiping the sun or worshiping the moon or worshiping the stars, we should be worshiping the one who holds the power of those things. Yes, ma'am?
It's just like God made grown-ups, so he made the vegetation already grown. He made it grown.
Right. And yes, I have no problem with that. Although it does say sprout vegetation. He did cause vegetation to sprout. Where'd the seeds come from, though, that sprouted? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Chicken. The fifth day, living creatures. And we're talking about cattle, we're talking about the beasts, we're talking about creepy crawly things. So we're talking about all living creatures, which would include insects and reptiles and those kinds of things. Then on the sixth day, what's he create? Man. Is there a reason for the order?
I think so. He wanted everything presented to man already done.
Okay.
Kind of like a famous chef at your table.
Let me ask it this way. Does the text specify a reason for the order?
They're going to have, man's going to have dominion over everything, so, and they're special because they're different than everything else.
Which is, okay, man is clearly painted as being special. Because it's the only thing of which it says we're created in his image. And it's the only thing that he directly communicates with. And then he gives him dominion over all the rest of creation. And so that's significant. I talked about the light and then the sun and the moon being created later. And the sun and moon were given dominion over the day and the night, even though the day and the night had happened for a couple of days before they were a sun and moon. So who had dominion over the animals before man was made? Now, this is what's important. Remember I talked about the fact that one of the things that we can extract from that information about the light is that it's not the sun that holds the authority, it's God that holds the authority. The same thing is here. It's not man that holds any special authority. It's not man that's anything special. It's God. God's created the order. God has placed it the way he's placed it. God has given man dominion. It arises from God. There's an argument made later in the scriptures about the fact that man was created first and then woman was created for man last. If I were to apply that logic to the rest of creation, then it would seem that man was created to serve the rest of creation, but that's not the way it's pictured here. It's pictured, in fact, the exact opposite, that man was given dominion and authority over the rest of creation. What does that mean for us? Why does he let us know that? Why does he say this in a way that shows that God made all this stuff, and by virtue of that, we know that it belongs to who? God. The creator of the thing owns the thing. And then he gives us dominion. What's he trying to get us to understand?
But as long as we're here, we are stewards.
Okay, we're stewards. Stewardship requires what?
A certain amount of authority is
It does. And then on the other side of that coin, responsibility, accountability. That's part of what he's trying to get us to understand. The world doesn't belong to us. The world belongs to God. It was here before we were here. These things existed before we existed. We were made, and then he gave us authority over his creation. That implies what? Well, let's just use common sense. If you hand me something that belongs to you for me to use to accomplish my purposes, what should I do with that thing? I should take care of it. I should treat it with respect. That's exactly how I was raised. If you're using somebody else's stuff, you treat it better than your own stuff. And I always try to give it back in better condition than it was loaned to me in. I clean it. I oil it. I service it however. I try to give it back in better condition than I received it in. Why do I do that? Because it's not mine. Because I am responsible for it. And what happens if I break it? Big sign in almost every mom and pop shop in the world. What's it say? You break it, you buy it. Can we pay for the things? Should we treat the earth and the things, the animals, the things that we've been given dominion over as of secondary importance, or should we treat them with respect that is due them because of who made them? We need to think about that. And I think that there is a certain aspect of this that is implied in the way this is laid out for us. Again, he doesn't give us a break. How many trees did he make? How many different types of tree did he make? How many different types of nut-bearing trees and fruit-bearing trees? And how many different plants did he make? He doesn't say that. He just says what? That he caused them to sprout. He caused the vegetation to sprout, and he made trees, and they each produced fruit after their own kind. And he talks about them in very general terms. He doesn't go into a whole lot of detail about how many and exactly what he made them for. And in fact, among one of them that he caused to sprout up, he actually told man what? Don't eat the fruit off that tree. Of these other trees you can, but not that one. Why would he place that kind of a limit? Who is he to tell me I can't have that? The devil played on that question. He used that to suggest that God was withholding something from man, that God didn't really have man's best interest at heart, that God was actually trying to keep man suppressed. God doesn't want you to eat of it because he knows in the day you eat of it, you'll be like him. Man never being satisfied to be in his station and always wanting to move upward, decided what? I want to be like God. This is all set forth for us, at least it's implied, to help us understand that everything belongs to God. And he is the God of everything. If he made the sun, the moon, and the stars, where on earth can I go to hide from him? Turn with me to the 139th Psalm for a moment. I want you to see that I'm not making this argument up out of whole cloth. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. Now, why is it important that the psalmist points out that God discerns his thoughts from afar? What does it mean to discern? To know and understand, to be aware of, and to grasp. And he does it from, it doesn't have to be near us. He can do it from afar. You search out my path, my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. What's the psalmist saying here? He knows the thoughts and intents of our heart. He knows us backwards and forwards and inside out. He knows more about us than we know about ourselves. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. And so the psalmist is recognizing God's authority, God's knowledge, God's power, and his dominion over him, right? Listen to what he says in verse 7. Where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. You want to know why he's there? Because he made them. We read about that, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Later on in day, 2, he gives an atmosphere around the earth and the heavens and creates the skies, that layer of heavens. And then he puts the sun and the moon and the stars in the outer heavens, the higher heavens. If I ascend to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, death, you're there. Does dying hide you from God? The psalmist says, no. God's the master over death. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me. Does getting off land separate me from God? Is he connected to the land? Listen, we kind of giggle at that, but that's the way men lived for a long time. They believed that there was a God that ruled this place, and there was a God that ruled that place, and there was a God that ruled this place over here.
Jonah proves otherwise.
Well, Jonah, though, had been influenced by the thinking of the world. He wasn't thinking about God in the sense of day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. All things were created by him, and nothing has come into being apart from those things. Nothing. No, he was thinking like the world was thinking, and he thought he could get on a ship and go the opposite direction, away from where God wanted him to go and away from where God was in Jerusalem, and he might be able to hide from God. But what did Jonah learn? Even in the bottom of the sea, God was there. And God had power and authority over the sea creatures, and he appointed one of those sea creatures to do what? To save Jonah by swallowing him and bringing him to shore and spitting him up. I remember learning about that story in Bible class when I was a small child. That was presented as if it was the discipline of God, the swallowing of Jonah into the belly of the whale and the 3 days he spent in the fish. That wasn't the discipline of God. That was the salvation of God. Which is why it shadowed the 3 days that Christ spent in the earth before his resurrection. In the bottom of the sea, at the base of the mountains is the way it's put in Jonah. Jonah is delivered when he prays to God, because God controls the sea creatures. Why does he control the sea creatures? Because way back over here, what was that? The third day that he made the seas and made creatures in them? That's why he controls them. He made them. I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me by night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. Why? Because God is light. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed of me, when as yet there was none of them. God knows the end from the beginning. God knows what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and exactly, in detail, even the hidden things, before they even occur. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. See where this leads? His understanding of God's authority over all these things is giving him understanding of God's authority over him. That makes him say, how precious to me are your thoughts. You want to know why he respects the Word of God? Because he understands the authority of God. And he understands the authority of God because he understands that he is the God of day and night. He is the God of land and sea. He is the God that formed man and all things that exist. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake, and I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. What would be the case if man was in control? What does man do to his enemies? He destroys them. That's what we do. Cain slew Abel. Ever since then, that's what man has done. This is drawing a distinction. Is that how God treats the people who hate him and speak evil of him? He doesn't treat them with complete hatred. What does he do? While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Despite that fact, he still opens up a channel of repentance and hope. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Here's the attitude that we ought to come to after reading no more than Genesis 1. I need God to lead me. I need God to search me out and to enlighten me about what is good and what is bad about me and make me better. Because I'm not going to do it myself. I am just going to try to climb higher and higher and higher and make a name for myself and do what I want to do and seek glory and honor for myself. Unless I remember that where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee? You made the land, you made the sea. You made the plant, you made the air, you made the entire earth, you made the universe. If I was to escape the earth and get into the heavens, would I escape God? No. What if we do one day colonize Mars? Don't think it's going to happen, but what if we do? Do those people escape God? No. Because who made Mars? So what it ought to say to us is that God is the one who orders things. God is the one who said a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. That's the next chapter, I know, but God's the one that said that. That's God's order. What right does he have to direct our lives? The psalmist says he has every right to direct our lives, and it's the only way our lives are going to be as they ought to be. What we ought to be saying is, search me and know my heart, try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me out of that. We ought to be longing for the examination of the light. When we get to the New Testament, there's a whole passage about that, right? That people in sin love the darkness rather than the light. They don't like to go into the light because it exposes their evil deeds. That's exactly what the psalmist is saying. Shine your light on me and expose my evil deeds so that they can be put away from me. But people who want to continue doing those things want them hidden. The psalmist is saying, you know what I know? Nothing's hidden from His sight. Everything is laid bare and open before God. Why? Because in the beginning God created. The argument that's made in another place is, should the thing molded complain to the one who made it? Why did you make me this way? What's the answer to that question? No. What should we do? Fulfill the purpose for which we were made. That's what we should do. We should be striving to meet our responsibilities and to fulfill our obligations, always understanding that that dominion that was given to us means that there is accountability. The fact that He said you have dominion over the rest of my creation should tell us we are accountable to Him for what we do. That's what it should tell us. That's what we ought to read in chapter 1 of Genesis. We have to answer to God for how we treat His creation. This all belongs to Him. We don't own the land. We don't own our children. Again, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but when Adam and Eve have children, what does she say? I've gotten a man-child with the help of God. She recognized that her children were given to her by God, that was God's entrusting of someone to them. We have to understand these things. I'll also very quickly throw in here, and I know I got to stop, but I'll throw these in rather quickly. This is the first appearance of 7 demonstrating completion. When you go back to Genesis, that's why the first three verses of chapter 2 are important. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all of the host of them. And on the 7th day, God finished His work that He had done, and He rested on the 7th day. Not rested like, whew, I'm tired, but rested like what? Stopped. He ceased. Because it was finished. He finished His work on that day. So God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it God stopped from all His work that He had done in creation. Completed all of His work that He had done in creation. The first introduction of this 7 meaning completion, meaning full, meaning perfect in the true concept of that word. The Sabbath observation, Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11, directly connected to this. You need to keep the Sabbath because you need to remember that on the 7th day God rested from all of His labor. And that is a shadow of the salvation we hold in Jesus. Read about halfway through Hebrews chapter 3 through the end of chapter 4. Read, I think, about verse 12. Hebrews 3:12 through the end of chapter 4. And you will see that the Sabbath rest that remains is all about our salvation. And so Genesis 1 and Him resting on the 7th day is all about priming us to understand what? Salvation. Completing things, being done, finishing things. What did Jesus say on the cross? It is finished. We need to think about all of that because all of that is incorporated in what this is saying. This is the foundation that leads the way for all that stuff that comes later. Any other questions or comments before we stop? I'm assuming that Sherry came in here because the video went wacky again.
It's actually been fine.
I'm sideways on my... All right, thanks for your presence, participation.